Hello everyone, welcome to DotNetMirror channel. Today I am thrilled to kick off a brand new series on Azure Functions. If you have ever felt overwhelmed by the cost of cloud hosting, or if you tried to manage virtual machines just to run a simple piece of code, you run in the right place. Today we are breaking down the world of serverless. We look at what it actually means, how it differs from traditional hosting, and especially how Microsoft Azure Functions can make your life as a developer much easier. Let's dive in. Before we get into how, let's look at our roadmap for this video. First, we need to understand the history, how we got from massive monoliths to microservices, and finally to FaaS or functions as a service. We will then define the serverless paradigm. It's about a buzzword, but we are going to make it practical. We will deep dive into Azure functions, hosting plans, so you know how to save the money. And we will wrap up with real world use cases and most importantly, the scenarios where you should not use Azure functions. By end of this video, you will have a professional grasp about technology fits into your toolkit. If you are new to our channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to stay updated with our latest Azure and .NET videos. Let's get into the video. To understand where we are going, we have to see where we started. For decades, we built monoliths. This is like a giant container ship where everything, your UI, your database logic, and your shipping services and user profiles is all in one giant code base. While it is easy to start with a monolith, it becomes a nightmare to scale. If your user profile section gets a lot of traffic, you have to duplicate the entire ship just to handle that one small part. Plus, if one of your developer makes a mistake in the billing section, the whole ship can sink. It's high risk and slow to move. Then came microservices. We decided to break that giant ship into fleet of smaller boats. Now orders is one service and inventory is another. They talk to each other over APIs. This was a huge step forward. We could update the inventory boat without touching the orders boat, but there was a catch. We still had to manage those boats. We had to handle networking, containers, Kubernetes clusters, and scaling rules for each individual service. It solved the scale problem, but it significantly increased the operational headache for the DevOps team. Now we have arrived at FaaS, functions as a service. Think of this as taking microservices to the extreme. Instead of service boat, we just have the logic. In FaaS, your application is a collection of individual functions. Each function does exactly one thing. Maybe one function just sends an email and another function just resizes a photo. You don't manage the boat, you don't even manage the water, you just provide the code. And the cloud provider handles everything else. This is the core of Azure functions. Let's look at this side by side because this is where the business value becomes clear. In a monolith, your deployment unit is the whole app. In FaaS, it's just one function. Look at the scaling row. In a monolith, it's all or nothing. In FaaS, if one specific function is popular, Azure scales just that code instantly. And the cost model is the real winner here. Traditional architecture always on. You pay for the server even if it is doing nothing. With FaaS and Azure functions, you move to pay for use. If your code doesn't run, you don't pay. This shift from always on to on demand is why startups and enterprises are moving to serverless so quickly. Let's look at the problem with traditional servers. If you have used Azure App Service before, you know you run a plan that is basically a virtual machine. It runs 24 by 7. Even at 3 a.m., if your server sitting there waiting for a request that never comes, Microsoft is still sending you a bill. Serverless changes the game. People often say serverless is a misleading name because obviously there are still servers in a data center somewhere, but from your perspective, there are no servers. You don't patch the OS, you don't manage the security updates for the hardware. You are effectively outsourcing the entire infrastructure management to Microsoft so you can focus 100% on your code. Let's look at the serverless paradigm. The best way to think about the serverless paradigm is to compare it with your electricity meter. You don't pay for the power plant maintenance, you don't pay for the wires in the street. You just flip a switch, the light comes on, and your meter starts spinning. You turn the switch off, and the meter stops. Azure Functions works exactly like this. It's event driven. Something happens, a user clicks on a button, a file is uploaded, or a timer goes off, that flips the switch. Your code runs, completes its tasks, then immediately stops. You are billed for the milliseconds of the execution and not a penny more. Let's look at what is Azure Function. So, to give you a formal definition, Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that allows you to run a small piece of code which we call functions, without worrying about application infrastructure. It is the glue of Azure ecosystem. It can react to almost anything happening in your cloud environment. It scales automatically. If 10,000 people hit your function at once, Azure will spin up 10,000 instances to handle it, and then shrink it back to zero when the rush is over. And if you look at some of the key components in the Azure functions are triggers, bindings, and different supported language. There are different triggers available like HTTP trigger, timer trigger, blob trigger, queue, event hub, or many more. When it comes to binding, where you can bind input and output to your triggers, and you can develop Azure functions with different supported language, C Sharp, Python, Java, and many more. Now let's look at how do you pay. There are three main ways. First, the flex consumption plan. This is true serverless experience and what I recommend for the most workloads. It scales fast and supports virtual networking integration, which is huge for security. You pay only for execution. Second is the premium plan. This is for the enterprises that need always warm instances to avoid cold starts, where the first request takes a few extra seconds. You pay for second based on the pre-warmed instances. Finally, the dedicated plan. If you already have an Azure App Service running for a website and it has extra CPU for you, you can run your functions there for free. Since you are already paying for the VM, it's not serverless in the scaling sense, but it's very cost effective for the predictable loads. Let's make this real. When would you actually use Azure functions? Example, in the case of file processing, a user uploads a high resolution 4K photo to Azure storage. A function wakes up, create a thumbnail version, and saves it. And when it comes to scheduled jobs, you need to clean up your database every night at midnight. Instead of server running 24 by 7 for a 10-minute task, use a timer trigger. The other one is AI pipelines. This is huge right now. You can pull a customer review from a queue, send it to an open API for sentimental analysis, and save the results in a database, all with just a few lines of code. The other use case, IoT, processing thousands of sensor data points coming in from an event hub in a real time scenario, you can use Azure Functions. Let's see when not to use Azure Functions. Azure Functions is not a silver bullet. Don't use it for long running tasks. The consumption plan has a timeout, like usually 5 to 10 minutes. If your task takes 2 hours to process a video, a function is not the right tool. Also, functions are stateless. If you need to remember what happened in previous step, you will need durable functions, which we will cover later in the series. Speaking about the series, look at what we have coming up. We are going to set up a Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, write our first HTTP function in C Sharp, and explore trigger and bindings, which will allow you to connect to a database without writing connection string. We will create series of Azure function videos in the upcoming days. Thank you so much for watching the first module of our Azure Function series. I have linked the official Microsoft documentation to start on Azure Functions. If this video helped you to understand serverless, please hit the like button, subscribe to DotNetMirror so you don't miss our upcoming series videos. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I respond to every single one. I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.